Okay, we won't keep you waiting too long. I'm going to hand over straight to Seb to say a few opening remarks, and then the rest of the panel will also say something.
Jackie, thank you, and welcome. Sorry to keep you waiting a few moments, and particularly welcome to my council colleagues who I've been with all day. I don't think you need me to say this, and I think my council colleagues would agree with me. This is a pretty important week in the history of our sport. As you know, we will be discussing, debating, and hopefully passing the very, very needed reform proposals that we have worked up over many months and in all the continents of the country, of the world. And this is a moment to be bold. This is not a moment to be timid. And fundamentally, these reforms are about standing tall for the clean athletes. The clean athletes have to know that we are in their corner. So we've had 2 days of council meetings. We had an executive board the day before the first of those council meetings. And I'll just take you through a few of the key elements. We awarded the 2018 IAAF World Race Walking Team Championships to the city of Taichung. They have held those championships before, both at World Challenge level, and we are in very, very safe hands. And the IAAF Cross-Country Championships for 2019 are going to the city of Aarhus in Denmark. And of course, it was Copenhagen, under the auspices of the Danish Federation, that helped us create a new format for the World Half Marathon Championships back a couple of years ago, which created not just the elite race, but the game changer of a participation race, which has made such a huge difference and is now the template that every city follows. We had presentations on and on behalf of the 4 events. London 2017, obviously our World Championships next year. The Cross-Country Championships 2017 next year also in Kampala. The World Relay Championships, it's barely credible that this is now the 3rd edition that we're looking forward to, and the Under-18 Championships in Nairobi. And all, I'm happy to report to you, are progressing extremely well. But clearly the focus of the bulk of the 2 days was the work around the reforms, and frankly the work that we're doing to regain trust both in the organisation and on the field of play. Let me just take you through the reforms and our thinking behind those. And I'm not going to go into any great detail because many of you are familiar with the concept and the proposals. But in simple terms, and really in essence, they are really about redefining roles and responsibilities, including empowering our member federations and ensuring much stronger area representation. Clearly a greater voice for the athletes, and that was something I was very clear about when I became president. Rossley, who joins me this evening, chairs the Athletes Commission. One of the first things I did was to appoint an athlete to a full-time role on the council, and if we're successful with these reforms on Saturday, he will be joined by another athlete on councils going forward. Clearly a real drive for better gender balance in the sport, including specific programs to encourage a talent pool of women to feel in a position to stand for those positions in our sport, which is really so essential. And some of the presentations we've had today from the local organising committees, from the member federations, tells me that that reserve of talent is there. We really do need to create some programs and some pipelines to make sure that we are utilising 50% of the talent in our sport, and of course the independent anti-doping integrity and discipline functions. The governance structure reform proposals provide the required checks and balances to ensure our sport is protected in future. I do not want this sport to ever return to the grotesque stories that even over the last few days we've been waking up to. The reforms create the strongest set of foundations upon which we need to build new fans, to create new formats, to find new partners, and frankly, to create new and exciting events. We must engage with young people. We must find new fans. And that is something that sits at the heart of the strategy that our Chief Executive, Olivier Gers, introduced to the Council and was unanimously supported just 2 days ago. The key reform, of course, is the integrity unit. And let me put that slightly into perspective, because in 2016, 59 of the doping offences that were reported did not start from positive drug tests alone. They were from intelligent testing, they were from information gathering, and it's not simply about the number of tests that you undertake, it really is about the quality of those tests, where those tests take place, the time of the year they take place, and where they take place. So the integrity unit is a very important chunk of the reform proposals that we will be voting on Saturday. We know that the integrity unit itself will manage all doping and non-anti-doping integrity matters, and in conjunction with the new discipline committee, tribunal will hear and decide all breaches, impose sanctions, will take responsibility away from national level, from member federations, and fundamentally do it quicker. One of the issues that has really frustrated many of you in the sport, many of the athletes, many of our federations, and many of the fans is the length of time that it takes to conclude these cases. And the length of time has also caused us reputational damage. So the integrity unit, not only utilising a new approach to anti-doping, will also, I hope, speed up the process from abnormal finding through to sanction, and then through even to the appeal process. But to ensure its independence, the unit will have its own board and staff and be housed in and operate separately from our headquarters. It will also now report annually to Congress. We also launched something which many of you have already seen, but is our Report Doping. It's an online portal. It was launched on Tuesday. It will confidentially and securely allow people to feed information, report on information about doping into a centralized system. This is an important platform, and I can report that within the first 12 hours, we had 14 leads. Within the first 48 hours, we had a total of 43. And as you know, the beginning of this week, athletes issued a statement in support of the portal, in support of the reforms, and from the middle of November, when we had, by conference call, a discussion around how the Athletes Commission could support and be front and centre in these changes, I'm delighted to say that the statement they issued the other day reflects absolutely and quintessentially the journey that we must take. So I'm going to hand over to Rossley, the chair of the Athletes Commission, who I'm sure will put that in his own words.
Thank you, President. Since I became chair of Athletes Commission, I was thinking a lot, and especially in last few days, why are we all here? And my answer to this is, we are here because of the athletes. And my second question to this is, what the athletes need? And the athletes need healthy environment, friendly environment, and conditions that they will reach results for what they are training, dedicate their time. And how can we help them in this? My answer to this is, again, we need the reforms. And why we need reforms? Because we need the organization that will work properly, without corruption, with good governance, and that the athletes will not paying the price, because you must know that always are the athletes who are paying the highest price if this is not fulfilled. And so for this, the Athletes Commission and I personally fully support the government's reforms, and we need these reforms because if we will not change, then the history will show in which direction we will go. But at the end of the day, this will not be good for the athletes. And I appeal to all the delegates that we must support the changes because we want future, especially for young and clean athletes. And I think if we support the reforms, there is future for young athletes.
Rosle, thank you. And finally, but certainly not least, I'm delighted to be joined by Rune Andersen. Rune, as you know, is the independent chair of the task force that we set up to look at the whole issue around the anti-doping challenges that we faced in Russia. I met with Rune in Rio, having maintained the suspension of the Russian Federation. I thought it was very important, and I spoke to many of you individually and collectively, that it was important that we returned clean athletes from clean systems into international competition. And the task force met in Rio. They met, I think, last night. And it was important that Rune was able to report on any progress that they have been making towards that. And I'm going to hand over to Rune.
Thank you, Seb. I just thought I would start by reminding us all of the reinstatement conditions for RUSAF in order to be reinstated into the track and field family. And those are, one, that RUSAF, which is the track and field federation in Russia, that RUSAF complies in full with the World Anti-Doping Code and IAAF anti-doping rules. Secondly, that the IAAF and RUSADA, which is the Russian National Anti-Doping Agency, are able to conduct their anti-doping programs in Russia, and in particular drug testing, effectively and without interference. And thirdly, that as a result, the reintegration of Russian athletes into international competitions will not jeopardize the integrity of those competitions. So those are reinstatement conditions that you are or should be familiar with. So I reported to the Council today that RUSAF has made further progress towards satisfying the reinstatement conditions since June 2016, including rolling out anti-doping education modules for coaches and athletes, securing cooperation by the Russian criminal authorities with their French counterparts, and the Russian Parliament, the Duma, passing a new law criminalizing the supply of prohibited substances to athletes. One of the key remaining issues is how to demonstrate that IAAF and RUSADA, once it is reinstated, will be able to conduct their anti-doping programs in Russia without outside interference. To address this point, the task force will go to Moscow in January to assess the response to Professor McLaren's final report, which is due on the 9th of December. It will also closely monitor RUSADA's effort to meet the conditions set by WADA for reinstatement as a truly autonomous, independent, and properly resourced NADO. The task force will report again on progress at the Council's next meeting in February 2017, so in about 2 months. At that time, it hopes to be able to identify a clear roadmap and timetable for RUSAF's reinstatement. In the meantime, the crack in the door for clean athletes that the Council opened up in Vienna in June remains open. Athletes who have been subject to the robust testing that the IAAF put in place in March 2016 can apply to the Doping Review Board under Competition Rule 22.1.a to compete in international competitions even in advance of RUSAF's reinstatement. I also noted in my report that I strongly support the proposal to create a new independent integrity unit in the IAAF. It strikes me that the new integrity unit could play a very important role in the future in speeding up resolution of cases and imposition of sanctions, and in helping the IAAF monitor and guide the efforts of non-compliant national federations, and this is not only for Russia, but in other potential nations, to bring themselves back into compliance with the anti-doping and other integrity requirements of IAAF members. So, Seb, this is what I would like to say initially on the report that I submitted to you this morning.
Okay, so we can take Q&As. I'm really sorry, there's a very bright light shining in our faces. So can you just put your hand up, say where you're from, even if I should recognize you, because actually you're just a dark sea of bobbing heads at the moment. Raised hands I should be able to see. Yes.
Hi, Mitch Phillips from Reuters. A question for Mr. Anderson. I kind of thought we had a roadmap already laid out. So what's changed now? What new points in the road are you going to deliver for us to see what Russia needs to do?
Well, the roadmap that the IAAF Council and the task force have outlined is the verification criteria and reinstatement conditions. It doesn't say anything about timelines. We are working very closely with WADA because they are also working with the Russian authorities, and specifically RUSADA, which is non-compliant as of today. And we are working in order to see how we can move together to accomplish what we want, namely to have testing systems in Russia which is not being tainted, which is, as I mentioned, independent, autonomous, and without interference from anybody inside of Russia.
Yes. Mike.
Another question for...
Can we just wait for the microphone, Mike?
Okay. Renee, hi. You've mentioned that you need to go back in February. There have been some statements already coming from Russia that they hope to be reinstated by spring. Does that sound a bit premature to you?
Well, we are going back in January. We are assessing the situation in January because we are meeting with the investigative committee, we're meeting with the Minister of Sport, we're meeting with RUSADA, and we're also assessing the situation after the McLaren report, which is due on 9th December. So all this together will be issues that we will consider and reassess that situation when we meet with the Council in February.
Sorry, Rune, could I just perhaps rephrase that question? Would it be possible, given what you just said, would it be possible for Russian athletes to be getting a return by spring?
Yes, as I also mentioned, it is possible for athletes to apply to the Doping Review Board of IAAF to compete in competitions if they can demonstrate that they have undergone a testing system. But if you ask for whether it would be a reinstatement of RUSAF, well, I think we have to assess that situation when we meet with them in January.
There's a link with WADA too, isn't there? Yeah. And RUSADA.
Absolutely. And as I just mentioned, this is something we will have to draw up with WADA when we meet with WADA from time to time in drawing up the way forward.
Any other questions? Right in front of the light.
Hello, this is Michael Reinsch from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung in Germany. Sebastian, you just mentioned these grotesque stories that still haunt you after waking up in the morning, even in the recent days. How are you and how is IAAF going to treat them? I mean, there is still this several investigations going on. What is IAAF planning to do? I mean, we heard about incredible sums being drawn out of IAAF and stolen. Will there be an assessment in the next couple of days how much money was stolen and stuff like that?
Look, we're still in a system, and I know this is not, this is not the most comfortable answer, but we are in a system. There is a prosecution taking place. We still have a court of arbitration assessment that, around some of the figures. So it's not something that we can, for obvious reasons, maintain a running commentary, but we have at all times been as helpful as we possibly can with any of the either independent inquiries or the criminal prosecution that has been taking place. But we just do have to wait for that process to take its natural course.
And sorry, the honorary presidency of Lamine Diack, is that a subject in the next couple of days?
It's not a subject in the next couple of
So
days.
you will remain?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, the question is, will Lamine Diack remain honorary president of the IAAF, or will that be changed in the next couple of days?
Sorry, we answer this all the time, but until there is a reason for him, there's an investigation going on at the moment, but the conclusion of the investigation is not. There's no conclusion to that investigation at this stage. So if you remember, the ethics board investigation from IAAF ethics board didn't actually look at Lamine Diack. They looked at other people.
So that is a case that sits within the French prosecution.
Sorry, gentleman at the front.
Hello, Mr. Anderson. John Lester from the Associated Press. Now, unless I'm mistaken, in the original way that your task force's job was laid out, there needs to be a final report from your task force with a recommendation, and only then would the council be able to consider whether or not to adopt whatever that recommendation is to accept Russia back into the fold. So are you saying that that final report could not be delivered before February, whatever happens? So essentially any decision on Russia is pushed back to the earliest until February, and possibly after that?
Yes.
I'll come over here and then we'll go back to you, Mitch.
Brian Pinelli with Around the Rings for Rune. In addition to the roadmap and the guidelines and what you've set forth for Russian athletics, how is the IAAF task force helping them along? What is your advice to them? And are you strictly observing what they are doing, or are you trying to work hand in hand to move this process along?
I guess my answer is going to be a little bit longer this time. Yes, we are working hand in hand with Russian track and field, Russian anti-doping agency, Russian authorities. It is a very, very thorough piece of work that is being conducted by the task force members. We are meeting, we are receiving documents quite often. We are reviewing the documents, we are sending documents back, so there is exchange of views, exchange of communication and distribution of documents and meetings that we are going through. And yes, we are giving advice on how we see that the verification criteria could or should be met. But of course, at the end of the day, it is the Russians themselves who have to do the work and who have to implement all these issues.
Can I just add to that? I think our council were comforted today by the observations from Rune in his report to us, that had it not been for the tough decision that we took last year, many of the changes that we were pleased to hear are taking place and the progress that is taking place would almost certainly not have occurred. The law has just been passed on the treatment of coaches and the entourage that are seen to be a guilty part of this process. We have made changes to the federation. They've made changes to their coaching structures. And above and beyond that, there is a shift of view. And this would not have taken place had we not taken the tough decision we did last year. And I think that was of comfort to our council, who in the early days were having to go this alone. And I think that's something that we should reflect on here, that change is often elicited by a tough response, and we will continue to do that. But there is a recognition that it is important that clean athletes are given a system to get back into competition, but that, as the report says, they do not jeopardize the rights of the clean athletes, and certainly don't jeopardize the integrity of the competitions that they come back to.
Okay, you have Mitch.
Hi, Seb. Sorry, it actually follows on from what you're saying there. Given today that President Putin used this phrase, so-called doping scandal, are you comfortable that there is a cultural change right through the system from top to bottom, or are they kind of putting plasters on?
I said structural change.
No.
No, I said structural change. I'm not making judgments at this moment about cultural shifts, because that really is for the task force to report back to us. But what I am satisfied is we are making progress. But you're right, this is a twin track approach as well. And there has to be a recognition that this is a system that cataclysmically failed clean athletes.
Yes, gentleman at the front.
Thank you very much. I'm Mutweri from Royal Media Services in Kenya. Well, we are talking about Russia right now, but before that, sometime last year, my country was way up there with Russia in terms of having a doping problem. And I remember, Mr. President, you said that if we don't get our act together, we shall also follow the Russian way. Are you convinced with what we have done so far in terms of trying to clean up the sport, in terms of coming up with legislation and all that?
Look, I was very clear at the time that these were two very different challenges that we were facing. I was very keen, so were my council colleagues, that we were not just sitting there waiting for these issues to surface and cause us the kind of damage that they had in the past, that we were proactive. I asked the medical and anti-doping team to come back and report to the council as to where they felt there were other fragilities globally. And this was actually assessments that were made not about our ability to test it at international level, but that the question we asked was, were the domestic anti-doping programs sufficiently robust enough? And in 5 cases, we had concerns. The timelines that we created for change have in large part produced changes, and that was what the exercise was aimed at doing. Those 5 countries are still being monitored very closely, and we will continue to do that. But this was not at that stage about sanction, but it was clear that we needed to make sure that while we had confidence that our international testing was in pretty good shape, we weren't confident that the anti-doping domestic systems, both in and out of competition, were sufficiently robust, and that is what we were addressing and continue to do.
Any other questions? Yes.
Good evening, Andrea Buongiovanni from La Gazzetta dello Sport, Milan, Italy. Mr. President, can you give us an idea of how many Russian athletes will be able to participate in the Indoor European Championship in March at this point?
No. Rune, I mean, do feel free to add on no, but
Me either, so sorry.
It's impossible to anticipate, but as you know, there was one athlete who was able to compete in Rio under these special conditions. Of course, there has been lots of work being conducted in Russia since March this year. A number of doping controls from outside agencies and also analysis conducted by outside laboratories. And of course, that will play into this when athletes are applying to the Doping Review Board to be able to compete at the indoor championship, as you mentioned.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, last question. No? Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for coming. See you in the next few days. Oh, I can't. Oh, I'm sorry. Come up.
And the last
Come up.
question from
Come up.
the last question from TASS News Agency, Russia. It's known that Russian Federation has serious financial problems, and we know that IAAF wants Russian athletes to pass additional doping tests. Don't you think that it could be a huge problem?
Let's be clear, we're not asking Russian athletes to pass any particular protocols that we're not expecting every athlete anywhere in the world to be subject to. So the issue is a very simple one, that my responsibility as a federation president isn't to get as many athletes as I can to championships, it's to make sure that we get as many athletes that are entirely clean from untainted systems into championships, but no Russian athlete will be asked to do anything that an athlete anywhere else in the world would not be expected to subject themselves to under any reasonable system.
Okay, thank you.